Okay, we're good.
All right.
So we moved back to Portland in 2011 after having lived here when our kids were tiny, babies. And at that time, we belonged to a non-denominational congregation and lots of young families. It was very, hip and appealing. But when we came back and our kids were a little older, I wanted them to grow up in a community where I felt like they would be affirmed in whatever God felt, whatever call on their life they felt from God, and that the church we had been going to when we first lived in Portland didn't affirm women in ministry. And that was a bigger deal as my kids got older than it was when they were babies. And so we decided to investigate returning to my roots, which is in United Methodist churches.
Can you describe the impact of First Church in your family's life?
We decided early on that we're church-going people, that's important to us as a ritual, as a touch point, as a priority to make church something that takes precedence. It's kind of like we sit down to dinner as a family every night. And this church has been a place both to feel grounded and feel supported and to connect to those traditions. But it's also been a place to be challenged and to grow in our faith. I think it's a place for me personally where the faith traditions and the teachings that I grew up with have been expanded. Again, like this is a place where I can bring my kids. They are growing up in a really different world than I grew up in, and this idea of rules and parameters and binaries, right? You're this or you're that. That's not their world. That's not where they live. It has changed. The pandemic has changed how I think about inclusion in the church. I think the easy way to think about it is racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, diversity of education levels. How do we make our church a welcoming space for people from walks of life? And that's important for sure. I think what has really hit me hard in the last 2.5 years has been the way the church includes people who are medically fragile, people who aren't safe coming into a space where people are unmasked and where they could potentially catch a virus. And it has made me think a lot about how we welcome people and whose voices get heard when we talk about inclusion. How do we even know whom to ask, right? When people who aren't included aren't able to come, aren't able to show up? Like, how do we access those voices and reach those people? There are people who need the community of the church but can't access it due to their health circumstances.
What is your hope for First Church this next year or in the next 175 years?
I have really enjoyed having a church that connects me to the traditions I grew up with. And I hope that some of those traditions will stay. I hope 40 years from now, my kids will be able to walk into a church and, see a stained glass window, hear an organ, recognize the vestments, and that they will feel comforted by some of those traditions that I hope will endure. I also am very encouraged by the conversations that are happening at First Church right now around our land story, and the humility and curiosity that I see in the congregation in that conversation, I think is giving me a lot of hope that we will be a church that contributes to the community in future years, that, you know, we're not going to allow ourselves to become irrelevant. We have a neighborhood that is so cool, that, you know, I just hope that we continue to take advantage of that, and again, don't isolate ourselves.
Absolutely. Robyn, we
Yes.
are so grateful to be in community with you. It is a joy and a privilege. And we're really grateful that you shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
all.
it.
Thank you.